All right, let's get right to it. I want to go to your PowerPoint presentation you sent us. And by the way, for those who need a reminder, Dr. Woods' website is andywoodsministries.org, andywoodsministries.org. You'll find that there. Your PowerPoint presentation today, usually, folks, what we do is we break this into segments and it makes it easier. And our segments today will include anti-Semitism, number one, Gog Magog, inflation, global tyranny, decline of the USA, Babylon, and occult revival. Anti-Semitism I dealt with last night. I had on Olivier Meldick last night, Dr. Woods.
Good choice. He
Yeah,
would know something about it.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, he does. So, what's the anti-Semitism here? Revelation 12 and anti-Semitism. Tell me about this.
Well, I like to start all these with a biblical entry point. I mean, that little chart there is supposed to be describing Revelation 12. If you want to know the mystery of anti Semitism, where it comes from, you just study Revelation 12. It's pretty easy. And when you get to the second half of the chapter, verses 6 through 17, you learn that Satan, who currently has access to God's throne, even as a fallen angel, he can still go into God's throne to communicate and accuse. He
And,
just can't go in to worship and serve.
and how often do you think that happens?
More time. I think if we knew how many times it happened, it would scare the daylights out of us. I don't even know if I want to know the the answer to that question. It's like Peter, Jesus coming to Peter and saying, Peter, Satan has requested permission to sift you as wheat. And in other words, Peter, and there he called him Simon. Simon, Simon, it's in Luke 22. Satan has requested permission to sift you like wheat. In other words, there's conversations taking place about you, Peter, in heaven that you don't know anything about. Same issue with Job. But Jesus says to Peter, I prayed for you. And gosh, if I had been Peter, I probably would have said, well, Lord, that's just information. I wish you had told me because it scares the daylights out of me.
So, what do you think when it says accuses the saints? Give me an example of what you think Satan is doing. Is he when he is accusing the saints? Or you think he's up there accusing who? What Andy Woods, a big Bible teacher, a well-known Christian statesman, the little lady that lives on the street corner that shares the gospel with kids to a backyard Bible club. What's going on here?
I think he accuses anybody that he sees is a threat to his kingdom. In other words, anybody that's set up by God to do significant damage to the kingdom of darkness, those are the ones he's trying to take down. And the accusation could be like in Job, look at Andy, he just serves you, because you've blessed his life and he has a happy home. He has a good livelihood, you know. He's got good health, except for his left knee. I need some work there, but other than that,
That's old sports injury.
yeah, I've got some excellent health, and you know, Satan would say, Andy's character is such that if you took away any of those things, he'd probably curse you to your face, God. And God, for whatever reason, lowers the hedge of protection and tells Satan to go for it, but you can't kill him. He's still on a leash. It's kind of interesting that this story takes place in the oldest book of the Bible, the book of Job, because this is an issue that we struggle with. Why is there suffering? Why do God's people suffer? And the book of Job, I think is largely an answer to that, a partial answer anyway to that question. I mean, God, in a mysterious way, uses Satan constantly for God's own purposes. Look at Paul with his thorn in the flesh, a messenger from Satan. He pleaded 3 times for it to be taken away. And God said, no, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So, God allowed Satan to have access to Paul's life to accomplish a purpose which was a higher precedence than Paul's immediate comfort. It kept him humble and usable and dependent. So, I think this kind of theodicy that I'm trying to describe takes place all of the time. And, because it's the spiritual realm, we can't see it or hear it,
Hmm.
but it's happening.
Do you think they are aware in heaven of things like what you and I do, or what any of our fellow laborers in the work are doing? Do you think heaven is aware of some of the things we're doing because of the spiritual battles going on?
Heaven is definitely aware, because when you get into Ephesians chapter 3, what Paul talks about there is the angelic world is watching the manifold wisdom of God as it's being displayed now by the church. And I think the angels' heaven is interested in what's happening because they understand God's holiness. They state, the seraphim say, Isaiah 6 verse 3, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, around the clock. And then they also understand God's judgment because they saw a third of their colleagues lose their position in heaven because of the Luciferian rebellion. So they understand holiness and they understand judgment, and they also understand creation, because Job 38 verses 4 through 7 says the angels were applauding as God brought into existence the heavens and the earth. But what the angels don't understand is grace. And so when they see God lavish his grace upon people that don't deserve it, which is what the definition of unmerited favor, the Bible tells us in Ephesians 3. I can also think of a passage in First Peter chapter 1 verse 12 that the angels just stoop down and study intently, because the angels are not omniscient. They don't know everything. And so God is actually using his dealings with us and dealings with the church to fill out angelic knowledge about God's character, in this case being grace, which the angels really don't know much about. So there's no doubt in my mind that the angels are well aware of you, they're well aware of me, and anybody that's seeking to live for Jesus in these last days.
Hmm. It's humbling and sobering all at the same time, right?
Well, it's humbling because we think our sins are secret. I'm just going to commit a little secret sin, but as has been said before, a secret sin is a open scandal in heaven, because they're watching constantly.
Wow.
So it's humbling in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Um, we talk about our Middle East update. We did regular updates with John Whitcomb till he passed away. We did this for about 11 years with Jimmy DeYoung till he passed away. So anyway, here we are with you. Hope you stay around a while. And the
I
rea-
get 11 years. 11 years till I die. Is that
I,
the track record there?
I hope not. The
Yeah.
point I'm making is, do you think folks like Jimmy DeYoung and John Wickham and others are aware of what's happening down here? Do you think they realize that we're carrying on? Do you think I know I'm asking for a lot of your opinion here on this one, but do you think that John Whitcomb and Jimmy DeYoung, who are friends, do you think that they're when they saw each other in glory, that they fellowship with each other in the context of their life experiences here, and even maybe talk of the work that they know is still going on by their family, their friends, their colleagues?
Well, you take the rich man that died and went to hell, he could remember. I mean, he could remember about his brothers. I think he said there's five. He knew about their unbelief. And he wanted, someone to go over and come back from the dead and share the gospel with them. So if they can remember in hell, I mean, I don't see why heaven would be different. Um, Heaven is just as much a physical, real experience as what we're in right now. So I think there's reminiscing, recollection, reflection. I think there's fellowship. I think there's conversation, probably on a level that's much higher than ours. But I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that those things exist. There is a verse in Hebrews 12, verse 1, that talks about how we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. What does that mean exactly? Does that mean they're witnessing what's happening now? We're not given a lot of information on that, but I think there's a lot of biblical data. You can kind of piece it together, and you can see that heaven is very much a reunion, a conversation, a recollection, and a reflection all at the same time.
Mm. So a Jimmy DeYoung could very well get there and give a report to Ron Carlson and others that we've worked with over the years and say, you know, I've been down. I'm just coming in from being down there. Let me tell you, they are working hard. They're still going, and they're still using your ministry tools. Speaking of you, missing you, but you're the seeds that you sowed in the life of those people. I'm telling you, Ron, it's still bearing fruit down there. I just came from there, and you died in 2011. I died, in the last few hours. I'm telling you, your fruit is still being manifest in the lives of people you discipled. Do you think those kind of reports take place?
Well, I don't have a clear passage, but based on what I said earlier, it wouldn't shock me at all. In fact, it would kind of shock me if those kinds of things didn't happen.
It would me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would me too. So anti-Semitism, that's rising. We dealt with that last night. Last night with Olivier Melnick, we dealt with 9 out of 10 things that must occur before number 10 happens, and number 10 is the mass slaughter of Jews. Olivier Melnick laid out 9 of them and said 9 of them have already happened. The only thing left is number 10. The foundation has been laid. 9 out of 10 has been done. The foundation laid for the next step, the mass slaughter of Jews. That's pretty sobering.
Yeah, I just got an email about a week or two ago from a church member that lives in Cyprus, which is maybe about 45 minutes from here, Sugarland, and she was showing me photos of stuff that got distributed all over her neighborhood in terms of literature. And I was just stunned to see it. Some of the most anti-Semitic stuff I've
Here in
seen
the
in a
U.S.
long time.
Here in the U.S.
Well, here in Texas, here in Houston.
Distributed, and we've been getting reports of that. So you now know of someone who personally has seen the literature, anti-Semitic literature, that they're targeting the homes of Jews and leaving this information.
Yeah, well, in this case, the person wasn't Jewish. It was just kind of blanketed all over their neighborhood. In fact, at the break, I'm going to try to grab those photos she sent me and send them your way.
Yeah, dude, we'll show them. We also have reports that Iran is marking the homes and businesses of Jews here in the U.S. Iran.
Wow.
Yeah, we dealt with that a few weeks ago with Annie Cyrus. My guest, Dr. Andy Woods, andywoodsministries.org. Let's go to the next point today, prophecy update. Anti-Semitism, we just completed. Gog Magog, we talk about this one pretty much every week. For those watching by television, you see a map. Those listening by radio, it is a map of the Middle East. We see Israel in the center, surrounded by Sudan, Libya, Iran, the various Central Asia nations like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, etc. We have Turkey, we have Iraq, we have Syria. They're all surrounding Israel. This is the Gog Magog, Ezekiel 38, 1 through 17 scenario. What's the latest on this report, Dr. Woods?
Well, the latest is it says Iran ready to ramp up joint drills with China to challenge the United States as a unipolar power in the world. So what you have now is Iran not just cooperating with Russia, but you have Iran cooperating with China. And we think China, at least I do, is somehow represented in Bible prophecy by the kings of the East that cross the Euphrates River. And as they're moving from the Far East into the Middle East across that geographical marker, the Euphrates River, which separates the two, they head to Armageddon to participate in the final battle. And in the process, they wipe out a third of the human race along the way. I'm of the perspective that the late John Walford held that very arguably could be China. But if that's true, and if all of these powers are going to come against Israel in the last days, then it stands to reason that they would start to cooperate with each other. And now you're seeing all three, Russia, Iran, and China, all doing military exercises together, exercises in the sea, exercises in the land, and exercises in the sky. They are preparing for war, which we would expect to happen.
There's the headline.
Which we would expect to happen if we're in the season related to prophecy.
Iran ready to ramp up joint drills with China to challenge U.S. unipolar world. There you go. You have here Revelation 6, the first six seals. Explain this to us, Dr. Woods.
Well, the third one there is famine. And I think that goes with Matthew 24, verse 7, where it mentions famine. And when you read Revelation 6, verse 6, it says, a quart of wheat for a denarius and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. And if you can flash forward there a slide or two to the Charles Ryrie quote, what Charles Ryrie says there when he looks at the normal purchasing power of a denarius in the ancient world is by the time you get to this point in the tribulation period, the currencies of the earth will be reduced to 10% of their purchasing power. In other words, what used to buy 10 now buys 1. And so this is runaway inflation as part of the judgments of God in the tribulation period. And so obviously in this season of inflationary pressure that we're now under, particularly with the dollar, as the BRICS banking system, as you pointed out, Brandon, is about to dump the dollar. I believe anyway, that this is stage setting for this radical runaway inflation that will exist in the tribulation period.
So again, all of these things happening, they just, goes back to the series I did last year, the convergence of end time events. I just have a hard time believing, Dr. Woods, all of these events are occurring. Okay, 3 or 4 of them. It's kind of shocking just to have 3 or 4 of these big events converging, occurring at the same time the Bible talks about. But we've got probably a list of 25, 30, 35 or more events that are of a prophetic nature that are converging now, setting the stage for these specific events that the Bible talks about to be fulfilled. I have a hard time believing that all of these things just happen to be happening now. The statistical probability seems so slim, and that, we'll surely be here another 1,000 years. Maybe we will. Maybe everything will slow down. But I have a really hard time believing that all of these events, statistically almost impossible, there's so many of them, that are converging and merging now at the same time, are not telling us we are in this season. Look at what's happening to our border right now. Even the media, even CNN, a few of the mainstream media outlets are kind of shocked at what they're seeing taking place just a few hours south of you there in Texas on the Texas U.S. Mexico-U.S. border. And of course, May 11th, Title 42 is canceled. They're queuing up. They're coming over, and it's going to be a human tidal wave, Todd Benson says. We're seeing it with footage we showed last night. I can show some here again in a minute. But we're racing the borders. We dealt last night with the fact that we have so many military-age males coming over the border. We had right there in your town, I don't know if you know this week, right where you're at, suburb of Houston, the FBI and the military carried out a week-long exercise for a massive nuclear attack on a U.S. city. They used your city, Houston, as the test. We know that Iran is sending people here. They're already here with terror cells. There was an Iranian that many say was tied back to the Republican Guard there, the Iranian Republican Guard, in a trunk coming over. We have no idea how many have snuck over. And now we've got reports coming out of Israel by the defense minister over there, Gallant, that Iran has enough uranium to make 5 nuclear weapons. How do we know that none of these nuclear weapons have been miniaturized into nuclear suitcases, something we know the former Soviet Union was talking openly about? Some of their former KGB officers, I should say, who flipped and came to America, openly wrote about it, warned about it, said they were pre-positioned in America. Whether they would still work today is another story. But let's assume all of those are no good. They're duds now. Well, that was what they were planning back in the 70s and 80s, right, with that technology. Now we're to believe that nation states, terror states, don't have that more advanced technology and miniaturized backpack nuclear weapons, suitcase bombs, whatever you want to call them, and they've been smuggled into America. This is, maybe this is why they're rehearsing like they are. Maybe this is why the government's bought up $290 million in anti-nuclear medicines, So I have a hard time believing all of this is happening with the racing of borders. Then you just mentioned the economics and the setting up the stage of inflation and all the things we could go through. It has to tell us something other than well, this is just all going to drag out for another 1,000+ years. Thoughts?
Well, I've got a lot of thoughts on that. There's an article that I sent you from the Washington Times regarding something going on in the Department of Homeland Security related to what you're speaking of here. And so I'll try to comment on that on the other side of the break.
All right, let's do that. And we also have those pictures of some flyers that are being passed out around Texas, of all places, that promote anti-Semitism. We'll show those and talk about it. Dr. Woods is my guest. Logan, let's show a few of these disturbing graphics. We'll explain them for those listening by radio, but some flyers that were sent out around Texas. There it is. If they lied about this, what else are they lying to you about? And what are they showing on this flyer, Dr. Woods?
It's a mindset that goes back to the protocols of the elders of Zion, that the Jews are responsible for, everything that's wrong in the world. And so they go through all of these supposed cultural lies that the Jews are behind, and look at how they lied to you in the past, look at how they're propagandists in the past, they're lying to you today. It's historical revisionism.
What's another one here, Logan? All right, these were passed around. Oh, wow. White Lives Matter. White Lives Matter. And it has a swastika and it has a website to send people to. So obviously this is kind of neo-Nazi white supremacy flyer. And you're saying these were sent to you by someone you know, and you're saying these are being distributed around a part of Texas.
Yes, this is a church member who received these in her neighborhood along with her whole neighborhood. And she was so bothered by him, she took a screenshot of it and sent me what just showed up in her driveway.
What's the next one? All right. The Real Plague. Oh. The Real Plague, and it has a rat with a Star David on it.
Yeah.
And then it says The Cure, and it has a mouse trap, and it's using money as the bait. Again, the characters of the Jews being money-hungry, greedy people, and the Jews as positioned here as rats. I mean, you talk about hate crime or hate speech. I mean, even many Jews say, I don't like this, this is wrong, but don't make it a crime to distribute this, because as soon as you do that, you'll make it a crime for us to practice our religion. I know Jews that are saying that in response to Tony Blair trying to use anti-Semitism to pass laws, and I write about it in my book, The Coming Religious Reich, pass laws that make denying the Holocaust a hate speech crime. And many of the rabbis are saying, that's a two-sided sword, that's dangerous. So while we're opposed to this, this is one of those things where if you live in a free society, you just have to condemn it, but you got to be careful saying, well, we now need laws to make that a crime to pass those out. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, a famous Supreme Court case involving the Nazis, protests, doing a parade in Skokie. There's a movie done educating people about it, a town of various Holocaust survivors, and the court basically said it's completely reprehensible what the Nazis believe, but they have a right to protest, just like we have a right, Brandon, to get on your show and use our First Amendment rights to expose what's going on.
Yeah.
And I completely concur that when you start to illegalize things, I mean, that's a double-edged sword, and that just recreates the problem that we're upset about.
Indeed, it does. You said that you had an article for me was similar to what I was talking about. Which article is it?
Well, if you go down in the Word document to Roman numeral 5, it says USA in decline, and it says DHS orders. This is just fresh out. This is the Washington Times, which I guess compared to the Post is more conservative. But it says the DHS orders employees to drop regular duties in the shift to the coming border surge. Now, why is there a shift in the border surge? Because of what you just talked about, the very near expiration of Title 42. And so to prepare for that, and really when they prepare for it, they're just creating clerical roles, making it easier for these people to enter the country, in my opinion. But to prepare for the surge, they're yanking people off of the anti-terrorism task force. As you read this article, they're yanking employees in the DHS off of things that they do where they try to unify families. So they're pulling DHS employees off their normal duties to prepare for this expiration of Title 42. And one of the things they're pulling their employees off of is anti-terrorism. So I'm sure Todd Bensman knows a lot more about this than I do, but if you just read this article, you'll see that this is opening the door to terrorists, entering the United States of America through America's southern border. In fact, according to the article, there are 6,000 people per day that enter the United States illegally, and the DHS is anticipating that number to double within 2 weeks.
Mm. Hmm. All right, let's go to this one. We were on inflation. Zero capacity to save. Argentines buckle under 103% inflation. Okay, Buenos Aires. This is happening now. This has happened in other places. Venezuela. I have video in one of my documentaries. Middle class eating out of dumpsters. I mean, it's on video. This happened not too long ago in other nations in modern times. One of those countries was printing a $50 trillion bill. Zimbabwe. They were printing a $50 trillion bill. People can go look it up. A $50 trillion bill. Well, here we have 103% inflation. I think this is coming to America. I told the audience last year, stop using the I word, inflation, go to the H word, hyperinflation. I think this is coming to America.
I completely agree. The economic policies of this administration are paving the way for this. It's something that's going to envelop the entire world. It's not going away anytime soon. And if I'm understanding prophecy correctly, it's going to accelerate as we get closer and closer to the end of days.
Let's look at this one here. The World Economic Forum says it will accelerate implementation of Globalist Agenda 2030. This would be under our next bullet point, which is global tyranny, correct?
Yeah, global tyranny, Daniel chapter 7, verse 23, predicts one world tyranny. I mean, this empire that's coming, as we've talked about on your show many times, arises out of the cultural inheritance of ancient Rome. I mean, and what was ancient Rome? I mean, that's the diabolical government that crucified our Lord. They're the ones that, popularized the crucifixion. They didn't invent it. The Assyrians invented it, but Rome popularized it. And that's a great way to keep criminals, would-be criminals or would-be rebels in line. You just hang out there to die through a cruel process. People that, were against Rome, against the government narrative, so to speak. And so that whole empire is coming back. If I'm understanding Daniel 7, verse 23 correctly, you don't have to like it, but it's coming. And so when the World Economic Forum says, we just haven't done enough fast enough, and we're going to speed things up, in my view, I thought they were moving pretty fast as it is, but here they're complaining that they're not moving fast enough. To me, this is all stage setting for the coming global tyranny that's on the horizon.
I agree 100%. Rebecca Walzer notified us last year that the folks at the UN, the World Economic Forum, these guys are all agreeing to speed things up. And now it's very clear. We also read an article the other day, Dr. Woods on the air, that the new King Charles, his coronation, is going to be starting in a matter of hours. I don't know how many of you are going to stay up tonight to watch it, but it's going to start, I guess, at night while many of us are asleep. I will be monitoring it and covering it on Monday with all of you. But this guy is a little antichrist for sure, and he wants people to pledge allegiance to him personally. But we're also reading he's going to work with globalist leaders for a big meeting in September to speed up the World Economic Forum. Here's the headline: Global Tyranny. Biden signs radical executive order creating template for social credit systems. By the way, I see a report, I'll be getting into it next week, where the WHO is setting up the same kind of thing on a global scale. So there you go.
Yeah, as you read through that article, you'll get towards the end, and the writer basically says this is how they're going to bring the social credit score system to the United States through an executive order like this. And by the way, keep in mind what an executive order is. It's the president illegitimately assuming legislative power that the Constitution doesn't grant him. So notice that they're doing this without the people's consent via executive order. And this is how they want to bring the social credit system to the United States. The social credit score system is not conspiracy talk. It currently exists in China. That's a fact. That's how the Chinese Communist Party controls its massive population. And if I'm understanding prophecy correctly through the Mark of the Beast passage, Revelation 13, verses 16 through 18, this social credit score system has to envelop the entire earth, as some kind of precursor probably to the Mark of the Beast, which means it has to come to the United States. And this scoring system that's now coming into existence as different government agencies are going to be given a score based on their performance. That's the proverbial, camel's nose under the tent, which is going to lead to a social credit score system ultimately. And it also deals with government agencies no longer acting on behalf of the good of the people, but rather they're acting just to get their score, at a higher level. And so this is all happening via executive order.
One more as the bullet point on this one would be the collapse and decline of the USA. Collapse and decline of the USA. Here's an example. Greatest coach in NBA history refuses to watch League after social justice tinged Disney bubble. Tell me about this. I don't follow sports, so I have no idea who this guy is.
Well, Phil Jackson, as a coach, won 11 NBA championships. And then before that, he was a player, I think, with the New York Knicks, and he won 2 NBA championships. The guy has 13 championships under his belt. He's coached Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant. He coached Michael Jordan, during the Chicago Bulls dynasty. I mean, if there's anybody synonymous with NBA basketball, it's Phil Jackson. And Phil Jackson was asked on a podcast, do you watch NBA basketball anymore? And he says, no. He says, I'm sick and tired of all this stupid stuff they have on their jerseys and on the baseline and on the court. He even made a joke about it, equal opportunity, goes in for a layup, and, Mr. Justice fouls him. And what he's talking about and what he's decrying is the politicization of the NBA, how it's now sort of a bastion for, social justice thought. And he won't even watch basketball anymore. Now, Brandon, you more than anybody know what this is. This is the Gramsci method, where you infiltrate Marxism, which is what social justice is. It's Marxism. You infiltrate Marxism to basically the centers of thought, including entertainment. And as this social justice mindset even infiltrates American entertainment, we're being propagandized into Marxism. And this is one of the many factors that's leading to the demise of the United States of America, or even a guy like Phil Jackson, who's no conservative at all, just says, I'm sick and tired of it. And although I'm Mr. Basketball, I'm not watching any more NBA games. And so that's where we are today in the United States.
Before we conclude, let's give people some hope. Give us some hope, Pastor.
Well, the nice thing about all of this, or the great thing about all of this, is we're right on schedule. We're right exactly on schedule. If you know Bible prophecy, some of the prophecy teachers say things are not falling apart, they're falling into place. Adrian Rogers said the world is growing gloriously dark. If you understand prophecy, you're not in despair, because Jesus promises us in what is called the blessed hope that before the judgment of God hits planet Earth, those of us that know Jesus personally are going to be rescued through what's called the rapture and taken to heaven. And so this becomes a way that you can evangelize people. The world out there will give you a little bit of a hearing when you start tying in modern events into Bible prophecy, and use that as a segue into the gospel by telling people that Jesus, his final words on the cross were, it is finished. And so simply by receiving what he's done for us as a free gift, which can be done by way of faith, we're tied into God's promises, including this glorious promise of the very soon rapture of the church.
Amen to that. AndyWoodsMinistries.org. Dr. Woods, thanks for being with us.